Good morning. I mean, don't expect technical excellence, basically. Um, this is me here trying to master 37 pieces of software all at once and failing dismally once again. And I will stress that I think Graham is probably watching, but he's probably not in the chat because I asked him uh, this morning in our group. There you go. Look, that's me. There's a picture of me, not a picture of Donald Trump and Keir Starmer, although we are going to be talking about Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. Graham in the chat, in our chat group this morning, asked if it was all right to watch because I keep complaining that the boss is watching me while I'm working, checking up on me, making sure that I'm not pocketing the super chats. But I'm fairly certain he's actually watching this morning, just not appearing in the chat. Good morning to all of you. It's lovely to see you all here. Hello, Scott. Hello, Sarah Davis. Hi, Liz Allen. Hi, Chris C. Chris C, I read your comment about not doing stateside with Mikey last night. I've got to be honest with you. I was exhausted yesterday. I had a good day, busy day. Did a lot of things that I've not been able to do for many months. But I also was exhausted. And there's only so much work that I'm willing to do for Graham. And I will stress once again that Graham Hughes is an absolute magician at doing this. I don't know how his work ethic gets him to do so many broadcasts, so many streams, with so many connections and so many other things that he does in his life all at once, while I focus on trying to get this right and getting it wrong. Got a bit of a Jon Stewart thing going on today. Got a pen and a piece of paper. It's my high-tech approach to how to do this. Can I just, I've only got another 2 days of doing this, today and tomorrow. So I've put some links in the chat. If you just scroll back, you'll see some links to the Trumpton account. If you're not following my Trumpton accounts, then why not? What is wrong with you? This episode is sponsored by the various ridiculous social media accounts of Trumpton. I am asking you if you will go and follow me and like some of the cartoons, etc. This morning's cartoon was drawn on the back of watching Starmer and Trump yesterday at their press conference. I don't know how many of you. Joanna Hammond, look, I'm going to take this compliment. Mike, you are starting to nail it. Sound quality, video quality, and you're about to stop a shame. Oh, well, there you go. Well, yeah, I'm talking to Graham about maybe doing something on his channel, something. I've got a little YouTube channel called TBC, the Trumpton Broadcasting Company, hence the logo here. And I'm talking to Wayne, the milkman, about doing a little show with him and resurrecting something that we used to call the Trumpton Podcast. So as I get a bit more healthy and get a bit more energy back, I'm certainly going to try and lean in on doing some more of this work. And I really do appreciate all of your comments on my appallingly unprofessional live streaming. I stress it is a difficult job to do, to think about what you're going to say, to acknowledge the chat, to have a subject prepared, to have backup media working, to stop your PC binging at you because it thinks a hard disk has been plugged in that isn't, and there's nothing I can do about that at the moment. But also to just do this every day. Let's all give credit to Graham. Anyone that can support us today with a super chat or a tiny chat or a couple of quid would be much appreciated. It always is. This channel exists on the willpower of Graham Hughes and us that contribute and help. And that includes you. And if you can donate some money, that would be awesome. If you can donate your comments and love and shares and likes, then that's even better. So let's have a look at what we're going to talk about this morning, or what I'm going to talk about this morning, and what I hope you will talk about in the chat. I'm going to play you another clip of Donald Trump. I don't know if any of you saw yesterday's various press conferences from the Turnberry Golf Course. I kind of found it pretty ridiculous that the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland had to go and visit Trump in Trump's golf course. Ridiculous footage from the golf course. Ridiculous footage of his press conference and trade deal with the European Union, and similarly ridiculous content in Keir Starmer's sit down with him. I read somewhere this morning that most of the leaders, world leaders, all talk to each other about how to handle Trump. And one of the things that they've come up with is that you just need to sit there and be as quiet as possible and get out of that chair from next to him as quickly as possible. I mentioned yesterday in the Politics Social group that I found the video of Starmer creeping to Trump spineless. Vendetta says spineless Starmer. I thought it was thought it made Starmer look ridiculous, and I thought it made us look ridiculous. And on a day particularly where we were celebrating the success of the Lionesses in Downing Street, Starmer had to trawl his arse all the way up to Scotland just to suck up to the orange blancmange. But, a day where we can genuinely be proud to be British, I watched that exchange between Trump and Starmer and genuinely did not feel proud to be British. Now, I totally get that there are diplomatic issues involved in all of this. And I understand that Starmer's team has to have, come up with a way of dealing with Donald Trump. But I think there's a way to do that where we retain some pride and can retain our sort of pride in our country. And I don't think sucking up to him in the way that Starmer did yesterday is particularly good. And there was one particular incident that I thought really highlighted the dilemma for Starmer, and also the fact that he's probably not well equipped to deal with Trump. So let me just see if I can get that clip playing for us. Here's the blancmange.
Will you visit London during the state visit? Or are you worried?
I will. I'm not a fan of your mayor.
Why not?
I think he's done a terrible job, the mayor of London. But a nasty person. I think
He's a friend of mine.
I think he's done a terrible job. But I would certainly visit London.
So what you see there is Trump slagging off Sadiq Khan again. Over the years, there's been a feud between Sadiq Khan. Well, there's been a feud between Donald Trump and Sadiq Khan. I think Sadiq Khan does quite a good job of dealing with the guy. But Donald Trump doesn't like Sadiq Khan. And we kind of need to ask ourselves why that might be. Do you think it's his housing policies? Do you think it's the congestion charge that Trump objects to? Or do you think that it's because he's got brown skin and he's a practicing Muslim, as Sadiq Khan says himself? And it shows there where Starmer, you can see the panic in his eyes as Trump starts to talk about Sadiq, a Labour mayor of London. And Starmer interjects and says, he's actually a friend of mine, which is kind of depressing, isn't it? I think, however much banter you might have with somebody you don't like, in order to remain diplomatically friendly, if an actual friend of yours, a colleague of yours, a member of your party, a very successful mayor of London, a representative on the world stage for our capital city, is slagged off by a fat blob of an American egotist, then I think I'd have slightly stronger things to say about that. I think I'd correct it, and I'd correct it in a serious way. And I think Starmer's approach was really to placate Trump and to make light of it. Sadiq Khan responded in typical fashion that, as I say, asking what is it about the brown Muslim mayor of London that Trump doesn't like. And this debate has gone back to, this feud has gone back to 2016 when Sadiq Khan was first elected, and Trump started talking about no-go areas of London, which he'd also been talking about prior to that, in fact. It's interesting, if you go back to 2015, when, dare I speak his name, Boris Johnson was the mayor of London, Trump made similar comments about no-go areas in London, and Boris Johnson told him he was being a ridiculous fool and he wasn't welcome in London. And then within a few years was welcomed in London. I don't think Sadiq Khan would ever do that. I'm fairly certain Starmer would, you know. Now, there's a pragmatist argument here. There's the fact that we were trying to avoid a worse trade deal, trying to avoid retaliation. Starmer was trying to convince Trump of the European position on Gaza in particular, and seemed to have done some work on that front, getting Trump to talk about reducing the deadline on Russia from 50 days to 10 to 12 days. It's always 2 weeks with Trump. I'm going to do something in 2 weeks' time. But Trump did make statements about that. He made some ridiculous statements, typical Trump statements of, I've seen the starving babies in Gaza. And you can't fake that. You can't fake that, he said. And this is a man that puts out AI videos of Barack Obama being arrested in the White House. This is a man that shares ridiculous memes of him looking like Superman instead of a man that wears a nappy. You can't believe anything that you see nowadays, and why Trump would believe that these pictures of starving babies and children are real, I don't know, but let's at least accept the fact that he is saying that he will do some action on there. He also, when asked about food relief for Gaza, said that America had given $16 million of food relief to Gaza, and nobody had thanked him. Nobody thanks me for doing that. $16 million. In the scale of things, $16 million is nothing. It's peanuts. It's really not getting anywhere near solving the problems that Gaza is facing at the moment. But Trump's immediate reaction is that he wants to be thanked by everybody for doing something that America should just do. The weapons that are causing much of that problem are funded by America, so the food that's helping to alleviate some of the problems there, in a minimalist way, should definitely be coming from America and Israel as well, and us. But look, Starmer made some progress. Anyway, this whole presser yesterday, including van der Leyen's press conference, which was even more stilted and awkward, made me think that why is it that Americans seem to like Trump and, as a rule, the Brits really don't? Now, I think all of us know some people online or even down the pub who might admire Donald Trump. I am fairly certain that Nigel Farage, well, I'm certain because Trump mentioned him in that interview yesterday, that Nigel Farage is a friend of Trump's, and that many people that support Nigel Farage similarly support Donald Trump. It's not difficult to work out why. It's because he's a racist, and racists really like him as a rule. But actually, he's not that popular in the UK. Donald Trump is regarded by many in the UK as not a particularly good president. And I've got some numbers that I can show you on that that sort of give, actually slightly surprising for me. I would have assumed that the 30% of voters who supposedly back the Refuck Party and Nigel Farage would be a fairly solid support for Donald Trump. But if you look at this graph, which is from Statista, you'll see that since 2020, his ratings have been fairly low in the 15 to 20% ratings level. And then over 2024, as he was running up his election campaign, his popularity rose to a peak at the beginning of his presidency of 34%. And look at the dive that it took at the end or the beginning of this year in quarter 2 and quarter 3, down to 16%, almost as low as it's ever been in terms of popularity. And bear in mind that popularity took a dive during COVID. So he's not that popular in the UK in particular. And I came across a really interesting piece that a guy called Nate White wrote for the Times, I believe. It's been a bit difficult to track down where this story actually came from. But it appears that the writer and actor Nate White wrote this article in response to being asked why Brits Don't Like Donald Trump, and I thought it would be good for me to read that out for you today. So I'm also, because, trying to cause myself some extra technical problems, I'm going to put the text up on the screen while I read it for you. So let's have a look at what Nate's response was. Nate says that Trump lacks certain qualities which the British traditionally esteem. For instance, he has no class, no charm, no coolness, no credibility, no compassion, no wit, no warmth, no wisdom, no subtlety, no sensitivity, no self-awareness, no humility, no honour, and no grace. All qualities, funnily enough, with which his predecessor, Mr. Obama, was generously blessed. So for us, the Brits, the stark contrast does rather throw Trump's limitations into embarrassingly sharp relief. Plus, we like a laugh, and while Trump may be laughable, he has never once said anything wry, witty, or even faintly amusing. Not once, ever. I don't say that rhetorically. I mean it quite literally. Not once, not ever. And that fact is particularly disturbing to the British sensibility. For us, to lack humour is almost inhuman. But with Trump, it's a fact. He doesn't even seem to understand what a joke is. His idea of a joke is a crass comment, an illiterate insult, a casual act of cruelty. Trump is a troll, and like all trolls, he is never funny, and he never laughs. He only crows or jeers. And scarily, he doesn't just talk in crude, witless insults. He actually thinks in them. His mind is a simple bot-like algorithm of petty prejudice and knee-jerk nastiness. There is never any underlayer of irony, complexity, nuance, or depth. It's all just surface. Some Americans might see this as refreshingly upfront. Well, we don't. We see it as having no inner world, no soul. And in Britain, we traditionally side with David, not Goliath. All our heroes are plucky underdogs. Robin Hood, Dick Whittington, Oliver Twist. Trump is neither plucky nor an underdog. He is the exact opposite of that. He's not even a spoilt rich boy or a greedy fat cat. He's more a fat white slug, a Jabba the Hutt of privilege. And worse, he is what most unforgivable of all things to the British. He's a bully. That is, except when he is among bullies. Then he suddenly transforms into a snivelling sidekick instead. There are unspoken rules to this stuff, the Queensberry rules of basic decency, and he breaks them all. He punches downwards, which a gentleman should, would, could never do. And every blow he aims is below the belt. He particularly likes to kick the vulnerable or the voiceless, and he kicks them when they are down. So, the fact that a significant minority, perhaps a third of Americans, look at what he does, listen to what he says, and then think, yeah, he seems like my kind of guy, is a matter of some confusion and no little distress to British people, given that Americans are supposed to be nicer than us and mostly are, and that you don't need a particularly keen eye of detail to spot a few flaws in this man. This last point is what especially confuses and dismays British people, and many other people too. His faults seem pretty bloody hard to miss. After all, it's impossible to read a single tweet or hear him speak a sentence or two without staring deep into the abyss. He turns being artless into an art form. He is the Picasso of pettiness, a Shakespeare of shit. His faults are fractal. Even his flaws have flaws, and so on, ad infinitum. God knows, there have always been stupid people in the world, and plenty of nasty people too, but rarely has stupidity been so nasty, or nastiness so stupid. He makes Nixon look trustworthy, and George W. Bush look smart. In fact, if Frankenstein decided to make a monster assembled entirely from human flaws, he would make a Trump. And a remorseful Dr. Frankenstein would clutch out big clumpfuls of his hair and scream in anguish, "My God, what have I created?" If being a twat was a TV show, Trump would be the box set. there ends the reading from Nate White and Mike Dix. I think it's a really lovely piece, and I'll try and put a link in the chat about that, because I think it makes clear what the British is, what being Britain, great choice of words there compared to Nate's, what it is to be British, what we value. There's been a lot of talk about British values in recent times, particularly with the rise of right-wing politicians like Farage and Trump. And I think it's always been very difficult to define what they are. You know, Farage and Trump would probably see Winston Churchill as a particularly strong character in our history. Many of us would have different views of Churchill's contribution other than the war to society. He was a racist. That's why Trump likes him too. That's why Farage likes him too. Is it about loving our flag? Well, no, not really. You know, I can take it or leave it. I'm sure most of you can. Is it about loving the Queen and the King and the royal family? You know, we don't all have to do that to be proud to be British. But the British values of a sense of humour, a sense of what's right, and a sense of backing the underdog, backing somebody that is up against a bully, is quite strong. And I think where Nate talks in a couple of areas particularly, but, you know, there's some beautiful language in there. The Picasso of pettiness, I think, is the Shakespeare of shit. I think they're particularly good phrases to describe the blancmange. But one area that he talks in the beginning of that piece I really like is that Trump has no class, no charm, no coolness, no credibility, no compassion, no wit, no warmth, no wisdom, no subtlety, no sensitivity, no self-awareness, no humility, no honour, and no grace. And I think in Nate's piece, he describes those as being qualities that Barack Obama did have. And I think they're qualities that you could easily say should be and are British values. So let me just turn to the chat for a minute while I recover from my reading, scene. Vendetta, Mike, can you do a cartoon of Cheese Dick as Windy Miller walking out of his windmill and then raging at it? Yeah, I've got a Windy Miller character, and I think I built the Trumpton windmill some time ago. That's a good point, Vendetta. Maybe I should totally go and resurrect that. Maybe a fist fight between a Scottish Windy Miller and Donald Trump would be good. Alistair Kern says Jane Goodley was looking down on the protest in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Aberdeen with a massive smile on her face, seeing a lot of the banners with a picture of Janie with the cunt on it. I'll probably just demonetised us by reading that one out, Alistair, but yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, look, the sense of humour, Jane Goodley did an amazing job of summing up our attitude and the Scottish attitude to the windbag. I have to say that I think the entire trip to Scotland was organised in such a way that Trump would never come across the public. And I think there was one moment in the press conference yesterday, I think, or the day before yesterday, when a bagpiper was playing over Keir Starmer and Trump trying to talk on the steps of Turnberry. And I'm guessing that bagpiper wasn't supposed to be doing that while an impromptu press conference was happening. So good on the Scots. But certainly it was organised in such a way that the public couldn't get anywhere near the guy. And I think that's incredibly wrong as well. I think that's weak-willed by this government. If Keir Starmer is sitting in Donald Trump's golden-painted ballroom in Turnberry, or the gold-plated and plastic White House that Trump resides in at the moment, and making overtures to Trump as if he is... Alistair, thank you for the £10 super chat to pay for forcing me to swear. I appreciate that very much. Funds for the swear jar. Sorry, Mike, says Alistair. If anyone else wants to get me to swear and then pay compensation, that would be lovely. But yeah, there's Starmer sitting there, sucking up to Trump, saying what an honour it will be to have Trump visit the UK later in the year for a state visit, saying how proud he is of the relationship with Donald Trump, how he described him as a friend. He didn't need to do those things. He just didn't need to do those things. Now, I think it's in Starmer's nature to be like that. He's actually a nice guy. I have met Keir Starmer twice. And he is a very nice guy. Close up, he's I think avoids conflict to a great extent. So I don't imagine it's in his nature to confront Trump particularly. And it's not in the interests of our country to confront him either. But it is in the nature of this country to stand up to bullies. And Nate, in his article, refers to the fact that our heroes are Robin Hood, Dick Whittington, and the underdog. And I would put Boudicca in that, or Boudica in that category as well, standing up to the bullies of the Roman Empire. Nearly said Russian Empire there, same thing, different history. But yeah, the British are normally proud of standing up for the underdogs. And I felt yesterday that although diplomatically, although quietly and in negotiation, I get it. Starmer did better than Europe. We got a better trade deal than Europe did. We got Trump to agree with more of the things that we were pushing. We are being used in a way by the EU as a method of communicating with the blancmange. And I guess that means Starmer probably has to play that role. Paula Thomas, thank you very much for the super chat, the £10 super chat. I really do think that Chuck Schumer's explicit abandonment of the working class opened the door for Trump. If you look at where Trump won, it was in the ex-industrial regions. And this is something we discussed on the Friday Night Social with Mikey, Ollie and Scott. In particular, when we were looking at the areas of North America that they all were brought up in. And I say North America in that Ollie is obviously a Canadian. But we were talking about the areas that Scott and Mikey in particular were brought up in and lived in. And very much they were post-industrial areas. They were either car or steel or coal areas, and very much matched the kind of areas in the UK where we find Refuck doing really well, where Farage goes to do his press conferences. He goes to Welsh mining towns and steel towns to do press conferences on purpose. There's a reason he does that, because he knows he is appealing to a left-behind working class who successive governments, Tony Blair's government just as much as David Cameron, Theresa May's and whoever else the Tories had in charge of them for the last 14 years, successive governments have let industrial towns in this country go to waste, and seaside towns as well. I'm lucky enough to live in a thriving city by the coast, but that's only because we're effectively a suburb of London down here in Brighton. Most coastal towns have been suffering for the last 30 or 40 years under successive governments due to a lack of investment, a lack of new jobs, education resources, etc. And that's the same in the States, and that's the gap that these right-wingers plug themselves into, and that's where this bullying character of Donald Trump plays well, because those people are looking for answers from somebody that can define their problem, and Trump and Farage are very good at spotting the problem. You can't afford eggs, you can't fill your car up with petrol, you can't get a doctor's appointment, you can't get pressure from the shower. Whatever it is Trump keeps going on about there, I don't know. But the issues that people face that resonate with them, they're very good at defining those, and then particularly good at coming up with racist, misogynistic, ridiculous, economically stupid solutions to those problems, and selling them as if it's to the advantage of those very voters, when in fact almost all of them are to the complete disadvantage of those voters. So yeah, Paula, I think you're right. I think there was a gap opened up by the Democrats and another one opened up by Labour to some extent, which still remains open to Refuck at the moment. Diz, why is Brighton different from other coastal towns? Is it proximity to London? Yeah, it is, and it has traditionally always been that way, because it was a royal town long before royal charters were given to seaside towns. Prince George, the Prince Regent, came down here to be with a mistress, and he built himself a ridiculous palace down by the sea, which encouraged the lords and ladies of his court to come down and build churches and terraced houses and wonderful buildings for themselves. And obviously the king needed a good train line to make that happen. Yeah, there's two geographic things that benefited from the Prince Regent shagging a woman in Brighton and building a palace for her. Was that we got a reasonable train line, although a lot of people down here would say not, but we did get a better one than Margate or Cromer or Blackpool. And in fact, not Blackpool. Blackpool got one of the first and best railway lines from the north. Various seaside towns were neglected from that point of view, although they were kind of built on the railways. What Brighton got was the ability to get to London in 45 minutes on the train, and many people use it as a commuter town now. I kind of object to that. There's a lot of second houses down here, but also we do have a thriving city. This city is alive in the winter just as much as it is in the summer, and that's not the same for many seaside towns, many of which struggle during the off season. And you look at Clacton. There is a reason that Nigel Farage chose Clacton, and there's a difference between Clacton and Brighton. Brighton, we're going to get onto the subject of the difference between seaside towns in this country now. I'm quite happy to rant about that for a while, but Brighton is often we refer to ourselves as the independent Republic of Brighton, or the People's Republic of Brighton. We've elected the first Green MPs to Parliament, and we consistently elect Green and Labour councillors and Lib Dem councillors. The Tories have, they've held seats down here before because there's some wealthy people live down here as well, but not as a rule. In fact, at the moment we have a Labour, Green and Labour MP representing the whole of this city. And that's very unusual down in the southeast. Most of the towns and cities around us are all true blue Tory and now probably refuck. But if you look at Clacton, there has been, it's a shit train line to get to Clacton. It takes forever. It has been underinvested in for decades. It's never had an alternative industry or business CBD based in Clacton, or even cultural environment that runs throughout the year. And that's why Farage chose it as an area, because a lot of people feel that they're living in a shithole. Look, Clacton's a lovely place to go if it's hot and sunny and you want to go on a proper roller coaster. Don't come to Brighton if you want a proper roller coaster. They're not. We've only got one, and it's on the end of the pier. I'm sure it's lovely. I've never been on it. But you come to Brighton for the nightlife and for the social activity, for the comedy clubs, for the plays and theatre, and for the music that we have down here, for the festivals that we have on a regular basis. This is turning into... I should ring somebody at the Brighton Tourist Office and get them to sponsor this show. But my point being that there are a number of towns and cities in this country, not just coastal towns, that have been neglected over the years. And that's the space that Donald Trump puts himself, and he's, or Nigel Farage in particular. But if we look at America, it's the same issue. There are vast cities in America. Detroit would be probably the best example, where industry has collapsed, and the infrastructure of America is nothing like the UK. And when cities are in that situation, they're just left to their own devices, to the local politicians to try and sort that out. The federal government doesn't really get involved too much in that, although I think they do fund those things. And Trump has played all of those cards there. He's played this hard man bully in those situations. And I think, to go back to Nate's commentary on this, it's well, I think the one area that I'd really love to go into there is the sense of humor, and I think that's a distinction between Trump's little lackey Farage and Trump himself. I think it's really interesting what Nate says about him having a complete lack of a sense of humor. If you think about it, have you ever seen Donald Trump laughing at a joke, or laughing with joy at somebody's story, or a hostage release or something like that, or a child that's done a painting for him? Have you ever seen him in any other mode than this serious, cruel and completely unwitty character? I think a lot of people describe him as a person as being very, very kind, very nice. He remembers people's birthdays. He can tell jokes in private, but he doesn't do any of that in public. And I think his true character is the one that's in public. He's entirely obsessed with himself and his own appearance, and the way that he comes across, even though he's an ugly, fat, orange man with, appalling hair, who's going bald, who wears a nappy, and can't help but shitting himself on the golf course on a regular basis, cheats at golf, cheats on his wives, has no love for his children or his grandchildren that is palpably there, no charm, no grace, an inability to recognize that $16 million of food to Gazan children is just not enough. An inability for him to see the cruelty that is being exploited by his bullying friends, by the people that he sucks up to when he becomes a sycophantic little bully on the sidelines of the playground, when he sees Netanyahu, when he sees President Xi, when he sees President Putin, and he admires them. He admires their autocracy, he admires their violence, he admires their invasions. This is a bully who is incapable of doing the physical bullying. He does the bullying with words, and then he runs around and hides behind the bigger bullies and sucks up to them. And I do not think that I want a British Prime Minister, despite all of the arguments on the other side of our diplomacy, of getting a good trade deal for this country in the face of a bully. I think I'd rather have a Mark Carney facing down Trump than I would the way that Starmer's done it up to now. Now, there's an argument to say, if things go terribly badly for the Labour Party, or on course, according to the polls, then you may well have a friend of, a genuine friend of Trump's in the White House. In number 10, to welcome him during his third term, which I'm sure Trump is going to try to achieve. Excuse me while I drink some coffee. Alistair, 185 watching. That's excellent to see as well. And Scott says, yeah, but we haven't got a Mark Carney. No, we haven't. But I think Starmer should look at Mark Carney and the way that Mark Carney is handling his response to Trump and try and take some lessons from there. Now, I don't mean we don't want to wind the guy up. Of course, we don't want to wind the guy up any more than necessary. But we absolutely should be using one of the qualities of Britishness that Trump doesn't have. Let's just go back to Nate's comments and look at the opposite of these things. For instance, he has no class, no charm, no coolness, no credibility, no compassion, no wit, no warmth, no wisdom, no subtlety, no sensitivity, no self-awareness, and no humility, no honour and no grace, and no sense of humour. Now, all of those things, if you take them in reverse, I would say are qualities of being British. If you said that to be British means that you have class, you have charm, you have coolness, you have credibility, you have compassion for others, you have wit and warmth, you have wisdom, you are subtle, you are sensitive, you are self-aware, you're humble, you have honour and grace. Those are things that you could say would be something we would all aspire to, at least in our Britishness. Those are the people that we would look up to in our Britishness. And I think somebody that could stand up to Trump with humility, somebody that could do a self-deprecating joke at that point, somebody that could find a way to tell a joke that Trump wouldn't understand. You know, I'm reminded very often of the fact that television shows, kids' television shows in particular, or shows that feel like they're aimed at kids. You know, South Park was very big last week. But if you think about The Simpsons, if you think about, listen, as a granddad, I've watched far too many episodes of a show called Bluey on the iPlayer. I highly recommend it. Actually, I know the guy that makes it in Australia, and it's a work of genius. It is really a very lovely cartoon series aimed at kids, but designed for parents to be able to watch. There are jokes in there that the kids won't get, that the parents will. There are jokes, obviously, in The Simpsons that are designed to be ignorable by young kids or ununderstandable by young kids, but perfectly reasonably funny for adults. And I think that's what we should be doing with Trump. There should be a position where you can say things in front of Trump that Trump thinks are compliments, but where everybody else in the world knows what you're actually saying. I don't know. I'm not the politician, so it's not going to be me that comes up with those ideas. But I do think that that's something that the Labour Party and Keir Starmer in particular should be working on. There's another part of Nate's speech which I find interesting, in that he says he scarily doesn't just talk crude, witless insults, he actually thinks in crude, witless insults. And I think that's the key to Trump, is he thinks in insults. He looks for revenge everywhere. And you've got to be careful of that. Obviously, we need to avoid him slapping some more tariffs on Rolls Royces or whatever it is that he released the other day. But in a similar vein, we should probably be working with the European Union to destroy this witless fool. It's 22:10, so I'm going to go and do the papers. Now, the lovely Graham Hughes, remember him? Oh, sorry, Yuri, urinary infection. Do love that name. Very good choice. Thank you for the £5 super chat. Trump has all the depth and warmth of a frozen puddle. Trump is a wee bore bag. Very Scottish of you as well. Yeah, he absolutely is. He's got no warmth, no charm. And yet, he manages to charm at least 30-40% of Americans and, still 16% of Brits. But I do think that's because he's a charming racist. And I think Nigel Farage is an example of a British charming racist. Farage does at least pretend to have some of the qualities that Trump doesn't have. But again, if you think about it, Farage, I can't remember the last time I heard Farage tell a joke that wasn't actually just a gripe or a complaint or a snide remark about somebody, a personal remark or a racist remark. If you think about it, Farage has never told a gag. And he's just a British version of Trump. Now, Graham, this morning in the Politics Social WhatsApp group, asked me not to show the front page of The Sun. And I'm going to show it because I want to be a little bit outraged by it just as much as anyone else. So let me just bring up the newspapers and let's talk about those. The front page of The Sun today is the Lion Ladies standing outside number 10. If you're a Sun headline writer, then obviously finding some alliteration with previous well-known phrases like the Iron Lady is something that you feel you'll probably be rewarded by. But in this case, what a ridiculous twat that wrote that, because these are lionesses. Lionesses go hunting while the lions, the male lions, lounge around waiting to shag them when they get back. Lionesses work as a team, and lions are individuals with harems. To call these people the Lion Ladies is a ridiculous slur, and that's as much of The Sun as we need to have. The Metro, football, obviously, for the next 2 or 3 days. I was contemplating going up to London today to go and see the Lionesses bus tour, but it is raining down in Brighton, so I'm probably not going to leave Brighton today to go up there, although it would be fun. But I think we've got another couple of days of Lioness stories at least, if not on the front page, certainly on the back. And it's come home again as the trophy is turned up by Leah Williamson, who was also a remarkable player on the day. Her work rate on Sunday was incredible. The I goes with, you can't fake that starvation. Trump and UK send new Gaza warning to Israel. And this goes back to something that was in that press conference that I played at the top of the show, where Trump talked about the pictures he'd seen of children in Gaza and described it as that's real starvation. You can't fake that kind of starvation. Well, out of the mouths of idiots come phrases that lead to support. So, Israel did let some corridors open for food to get through to Gaza yesterday. It's a drop in the ocean. It's not enough to achieve anything, really. But at the very least, it's a response, I imagine, to Donald Trump. So, whichever way we get him, we get him. And at the top there, talking about the trophy coming home with Leah there. The Guardian leads with the same picture as the Sun down the bottom. Proper England, selfless, defiant, hard-working and champions. Again, you know, if you wanted to look at the differences between being British and being Trump, then these women absolutely demonstrate what we are proud of. Hardworking, defiant, selfless. They were not the best footballers on the day. They were not the best football team on the day. That certainly should go to Spain and even other countries. But they were the best tournament players on the day. They knew what the task was and they worked hard to get it. So they deserve all the plaudits that they get. I'm just glad that they didn't have to go up to Scotland and meet Trump, because that would have been a nightmare. And then the top story on The Guardian, Trump urges Israel to let food aid into Gaza to tackle real starvation. Again, the same story there. Look, sometimes you've got to accept that Trump will say things, sometimes stupid things, and they will get results. So, you know, if that's been engineered by Starmer sucking up to him, then maybe that's a good result. Some people got fed today as a result of that. Daily Telegraph has a picture there of Lucy Bronze and Chloe Kelly, two amazing heroes of the game. I don't know if you know, but Lucy Bronze had a broken leg all the way through this tournament. Again, let's talk about British values, shall we? And let's talk about football values, because that woman was not going to be stopped from playing in that tournament at all. But their main story and their main takeaway from the Trump meeting and presser yesterday was not the starving children in Gaza. That may surprise us. The Daily Telegraph not leading on starvation in Palestine, although down the bottom they do talk about Starmer preparing to unveil a plan for recognising the Palestinian state. That story is running as an undercurrent through this week. But their main story is Trump to cut tax, tells Britain to cut taxes and stop the boats. This again is the orange windbag coming over here and telling us what we should do. Not only should we dismantle all the windmills at Turnberry because he doesn't like the view. I've got to be, you've got to make an argument as Turnberry was spoilt by the orange blob in his shitty pants yesterday. But no, he decided to pontificate about the fact that we should cut our taxes and stop the boats if we want to do what Farage would do for this country. That's exactly how he put it. The Daily Express picks up on that simple story as well, because its simple readers love that kind of thing. Trump's pretty simple advice for the PM: lower taxes, stop crime, cut illegal migration, and protect farmers. Well, those are talking points that we would recognise, aren't they? But at the top there, the Express now give our hero lionesses their gongs. Now, here's the interesting thing. The Express has spent the last 4 or 5 days receiving some credit from me for the fact that they've been leading on the Gaza story. In fact, with some of the pictures that have affected Trump saying that you can't fake starvation. But in this case, they choose not to pick out the fact that Trump said that these children shouldn't be starving and we need to do more. They chose to pick out the fact that we want lower taxes in the UK and you've got to stop crime and everything else. These are things the Labour government's trying to do. I don't know about lower taxes. I'm not sure that we should have lower taxes at all in this country. But anyway, thank you, Trump, for your advice. American presidents shouldn't get involved in our country. The Daily Mail, Trump tells Starmer how to see off Farage. I didn't see it that way at all. I think this is the Daily Mail. I watched the press conference. I think this is the Daily Mail trying to elevate Farage up to the equivalent of the leader of the opposition. But that list of things that Trump told us to do, he can fuck off as far as we're concerned. And then Nadine Dorris at the top there. Why didn't anyone warn me that weight loss jabs can make your hair fall out? Oh dear, what a shame. Never mind. And bringing it home, the Lionesses roar into Downing Street with a very smart-looking England team standing outside Downing Street, as in the picture on the front of the Times, which leads its top story, or I don't know on the Times layout whether the top story is the one with the biggest headline or the one at the top of the page, but the story at the top of the page, BMA risking lives by refusing to let striking doctors work. They're on the strike action by junior doctors or resident doctors at the moment, and then they have the Lionesses pictured outside number 10, and the fact that they should be pushing for honours. We're looking for a damehood for Serena and many of the other players. I think Lucy Bronze definitely deserves more than a bronze medal for that. And then Trump again cut tax to beat Farage. That's going to be a message that Farage is going to pick up and run with, isn't it? Daily Mirror, two stories, and one story that isn't really covered by anyone else, but obviously they cover the girls turning up at number 10, but also, and I did have to look this story up, I'm afraid, that one of the victims of the attacks in Nottingham in 2020 or 2022, 23, has been given a honorary degree, and his brother picked that up for him very bravely, and was able to talk about the tragic loss of Charlie, I believe it is. Barney. That Charlie, I think, is the name of the brother, Charlie Webber, who picked up the honorary degree on his brother's behalf. Nice to see the Mirror finding a Good News UK story in all of this. And then in the Financial Times, no picture of the Euro winners on here, but I imagine they're just more concerned with money and economy. But UK market, EU markets reel at bloc's big nations cast doubt on Washington trade deal. Yeah, I mean, this is probably the bigger story that came out of yesterday, which is that the EU deal is pretty shit. As far as I can tell, I haven't really gone into all the details, but it's reducing a 35% tariff down to 15% on cars and steel, but offering no tariffs on American goods into the EU. And Germany, I think, and France are quite upset about the quality of that deal. It also, in fact, they brought them down to 20%, something like that. So it turns out that the UK got a better deal by Keir Starmer turning up to Washington and creeping to Donald Trump by giving him the invites to the UK. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my thesis about Starmer is completely wrong and we got the best trade deal we could get. But what do you think? Let's come back and have a look at the chat, because I was reading the papers there. We are, let's see what we've got. Let me scroll back a bit. Talking about the football, Peter Paints Gartner, I reckon Spain was afraid of Kelly because of how she turned around that quarter and semi-finals. Spain was in awe of Hampton in the penalty shootout. Yeah, I think that's true. I think they didn't have any practice at penalties, did they? And I think Chloe Kelly coming on completely changed the dynamic of the England team, and it freed up Walsh to play the midfield a lot more because Spain seemed to focus on the risk of Chloe Kelly getting behind their defenders. And now I sound like a football pundit. I have almost never had an interest in football in my life, but I've been watching far too many videos about the Lionesses for my own good. Thank God it'll be another, 2 years before the World Cup before I have to get interested in football again. But that's my analysis of the game. I think Spain, quite rightly at the end of it, said that they were the better team, that Spain were the better team, but England were the better tournament players. And that turned out to be true. Let's have a look at Pete's Music. I loaned Labour my vote and I feel well ripped off. Never again. Starmer appalls me. Look, I hope he can turn things around. I hope the Labour Party can turn things around so that people that were willing to lend a vote to the Labour Party would be willing to do so again at the next election. And I'm not sure what they need to do to achieve that. But I think one thing they could do is show a proper sense of humour about Donald Trump and belittle the fat bully whenever they get an opportunity to, in a way that he would never understand. I'm going to pop down to Alistair Kerr again. Thank you very much for the £10 super chat. Here's an idea: make 6 tax brackets, just like Scotland. Instead of punching down, people that can afford to pay more to make public services better. It has worked in Scotland and we have better NHS services as a result. I didn't know that, Alistair. I'm going to look into that. That's fascinating. I've been looking, and it may be a subject of one of these videos or one of mine at a later date, but I have been looking at the tax system. I think there's, to come up with some ridiculous ideas as to how we might improve things and make things better. I think one of the big issues with the tax system in the UK and in the States, and I think this is what Trump has capitalized on, is this separation in many people's minds between taxation and services. I think, everybody is happy to say, well, I'm paying for that. But I don't think there is a direct connection to all of the services that we receive. And I don't think there's a direct connection through your council tax to make you realise that. Now, many councils, mine does, I'm sure many others do, I think they're legally obliged to, is to show you where your money has been spent. But I think there's something that we ought to do where you can have some voluntary control over some of your tax, where you can democratically make decisions about where that might end up. It's an idea that I will expand on in another video because we don't have time today. But Alistair, I'm going to look into what's going on in Scotland. That seems like a reasonable idea. How 30%, 35% of Americans, you could argue 50% of voters, just 51, 52% of voters, and how 16% of Brits can see that, these rich, fat slobs like Trump and bullies like Farage and Tommy Robinson, etc., have got any answers for them in this case, all of whom are quite wealthy people and should be paying much more tax. I think that would make a lot more sense. Billy Kershaw, thank you for that. Aid Thompson has called Donald Trump the golf cart Mugabe. Did you see the ridiculous golf carts? There was like 24, 25 golf carts trundling around. I was reading something this morning that tickled me, that Trump's golf cart is apparently 2 to 3 miles an hour faster than all the other golf carts. And it's done that way so that he always gets to his balls before the other players that he's playing against, so that when he cheats, like he did with his caddy yesterday, he can't be seen by the other players. And it's just a known fact, apparently, that when you play golf with Donald Trump, his golf cart drives 4 miles an hour faster. Ridiculous. Ellie Chaos, thank you. Look, I'm going to take compliments and plaudits wherever I can. I'm not normally very good at that. But thank you for the hand claps. Well done for doing a brilliant job of hosting the show. Yeah, I love you too. That's really sweet. Thank you very much. I do feel that I'm cocking up a lot, certainly at the beginning of all of these shows. By tomorrow, I'll be perfect, and then I'll stop doing it. So I'm sure that you will welcome back our Scouse mega god. I feel that, we've had 5 days without mentioning the Man of the World book, which is available from all good and bad bookshops. So I would get hold of a copy of that to find out how Graham ticks. But he will be back with us by Thursday, I hope. Let's just end on... Ellie Chaos says she's found Trump's emoji in the chat, which is this. Yeah, tiny penis, maybe that's what that means. Paula Thomas says that's what they think they're doing with the anti-trans stuff. They're wrong, but they won't be convinced of it. Now, I'm assuming we're talking about finding ways to cause division within society and get people angry about the other, which is certainly something that's going on with the trans community, both here and in the States, led by the States and led by the Christian ridiculous organizations that fund this kind of nonsense. One angry pagan, Mike, Starmer and Macron seem to be coordinating their response to Trump between them, Macron being sterner and more confrontational. I think you're right. I do think that Starmer is playing a bit of a blinder in this situation in many cases. I just kind of wish that he was also conscious of how it appears to the Brits. I don't think you should underestimate the fact that we need to feel a level of pride in our government, a level of independence in our government. And Starmer needs to be aware of that. And this comes back to Labour comms. This comes back to the fact that you've got various audiences. Yes, you're playing to the fat blancmange next to you. Yes, you're playing to an American audience and an EU audience and a NATO audience and Putin and Netanyahu. You're playing to all of those audiences. But never forget, you are playing to the people who pay your wages, the people that vote for you, and the people that, as a number of you have said, lent their votes to you in order to make change in this country. And one of the changes we'd like to see is a non-sycophantic prime minister sucking up to an orange blob of racism. Alistair Kerr, thank you very much for what will probably be the last super chat, unless, like yesterday, I did miss one yesterday, and I made a note, and I've lost the note of who it was, whoever it was. I think it began with a P. Thank you very much for coming in after I shut down the show yesterday with your £5. I will try and look it up and thank you properly. But Alistair, thank you for the £5 chat. To be honest, I don't really notice getting taxed harder. I think it's about £3 more a week, but I also need to look into it. If you're not noticing it, that's a good thing as well, I'd say. That's exactly how a tax system should work. Listen. Thank you very much for joining me today. We're just about to come up to the 10 o'clock slot. Some of you will go off to listen to Mr. James Bob, I hope. And you're very welcome to go and listen to him. There are other shows during the day. I will probably not be doing whatever show Graham does this evening, but I might. You never know. I've actually got a couple of things to sort out today. Darren Christian, thank you very much for the £10 super chat right at the last minute. You're doing a brilliant job. Thank you for filling in, and glad you convinced Graham to take a break from presenting. Nice to have a little less sweary shows. Well, fucking hell. There you go. I actually had a phone call with Wayne Lynch yesterday, and we're talking about doing a podcast together, and it's definitely going to be a very sweary show, and it's probably why it won't live on YouTube. But it's very difficult to stop Wayne insulting me. So if you're listening, Wayne, which I doubt you are, because you probably just finished your shift, there you got another mention. Anyway, goodbye, good night, good luck. Have a great day today. The weather's not going to be great, but we are going to be celebrating those girls on that bus. And hopefully Donald Trump has fucking left our country, and that's a good thing.